there, welcome to King Leo D&D. My name is Dan, and this is a series I am so excited to start because I absolutely love when new folks are getting to experience Dungeons & Dragons. This series is going to be D&D 101, just to cover introductory topics, getting just the basic surface area covered for different parts of learning what in the world do we do at the table when we play Dungeons & Dragons. If you are just getting started, look around, find a couple of the other videos that are going to be in this playlist just to help you get comfortable, a little bit more familiar, so that the first time you're sitting down at the table, you've got a better sense of what is going on than if you just went in blind. So with that, this one's going to be all about dice. What are dice? Why are there so many? And how do they even work? Great. So the first thing I'm going to cover is the name of the dice. Why do we call them D something or other? What does that look like? I thought they were just called dice. This is the one I'm familiar with. It has 6 sides. Are there more than that? Yeah, there's about 7. There's 7 in the standard tabletop RPG set. And so with that, to make sure that we can talk about each one as we need to, it's very easy, very straightforward. We use the letter D and then the number of sides that are on that die. So there's 7 different dice. There's the D4, 4 sides, D6, D8, D10, a different D10, a D12, and a D20. And so I'm going to walk through and talk about each of those. But very simple, D, number of sides. All right, so the first one I'm going to talk about is the D20, the most common, the most important. The whole game of Dungeons & Dragons revolves around this one die. And so I will talk about why and what that looks like and why it's so important. You've probably seen the shape before. It's on a lot of different logos as the thing. This is what D&D is. It's this little object. And it's so important because it's used for everyone. Everyone uses it. It is used for any type of skill check. So does your character successfully pickpocket the person that they're trying to steal from, or jump across stones to get through a river? Like whatever it is, all of the skills associated with D&D are going to be determined by this. With that too, attack rolls and saving throws. So if you are trying to hit something else with your weapon, you need to roll this die, add some numbers to it, and see if it hits that thing. And then also, if for some attacks, if something's trying to hit you and it's one that you could maybe move to get out of the way of, or it might poison you, so we're going to see like how strong are you at resisting that. Also is going to be rolling that D20. So super common thing. Scales from 1 to 20 to give it a lot of variance. A lot of DMs use this to represent fate or luck. And then it all depends on the narrative. Some people use it to represent the amount of skill that you show in that moment. However that works. But typically a DM will use it when the rules say, hey, you need to make this roll to make an attack, or if it's just unclear whether your character would be successful or fail at that thing that you're trying. Since the DM or anyone could really have some bias of, oh, maybe you'd succeed or maybe you'd fail. I think I have this idea, but really I don't know. It helps give a third-party view. We're going to use chaos and randomness. We are going to use a die to let us know was this successful or not. That way, you know it was fair, and you know that this was just the way that things are going to steer the narrative in one way or the other. And so that's why the D20 is used and how it's used in the game. Now I'm going to talk about the other 6 dice. They are used less commonly and for very specific things. And so with that, you could have a character that only uses the D20, the D6, and the D4 for the majority of the entire campaign, and may never touch a D10, a D8, a D12, any of that. It all depends on the type of class that you pick, the different spells if your character uses spells, or the weapons that they use, all use different dice. And so, like I said, you may only touch only a couple in this set. So don't feel like you need to learn all 7 of them or have them all handy or know exactly which one's used for which, but instead turn that around. Look at the character that you're playing, the class that you're intending to go into, or the weapons that you're going to use most commonly, and figure out which dice are associated with that weapon. So if you're a rogue and you have a dagger and that is your only weapon that you plan on using, then you would have your D20, and you could have a D4, because that's what the damage die is for the dagger, and you can be pretty much all set with just those two and continue on your way. However, you might be using a little more versatile stuff. You might have a couple different weapons. If you're a wizard, you might have a couple different types of dice that you need for different spells. And so just get familiar with the couple different things you're going to do most commonly. If you are a martial class, if you're somebody who's fighting with weapons alone, just look at, if you use one or two different weapons, what's that damage die, and set those aside. If you are a wizard and you have some damaging cantrips, which I'll go over spellcasting in a different video, but cantrips can just be cast over and over and over again all day long. No problems there. If you have a damaging cantrip that you're going to use to attack, then figure out which dice you're going to use for that and set those aside too, because it's going to be your most commonly rolled attacks. Have them handy. But with that, I'm going to go through what each of them are. The D4, four-sided little triangular guy there. Four sides on it, again, used for daggers and other things like that. The D6 is, when someone says dice, this is what people think of. They think, oh, this little six-sided thing, we just call that dice. Why do you have a video on dice? We didn't know what dice are. They're six-sided things. This is the most common one, used for most board games. But that's that one, again, used for like short swords, lots of spells, things like that. That's a very common one in the game too. Then there's the D8, used for some larger weapons, and maybe some other spells too, getting into that later in the game. D10s, here's the one I talked about earlier, that we have sometimes two different looking D10s. Here's what they are, here's what they look like, and you'll notice that one of these has zeros after it, and the other one does not. So we've got a 10s and a 1s 10-sided die. This helps to both do just a random number between 1 through 10, or you can roll both of them to get a random number between 1 and 100. So that's why it's called percentile, so that per 100. That sometimes for luck or chance or different random things the DM might have, that rolling two of them to get a random 100 is helpful. They add that extra zero in there just so it's easier to read, so you know, instead of rolling these twice and figuring out, oh, was that 54 or 45? Which order did these go in? This one lets you know, hey, this one's the 10s, roll this first. All right, let's say 20 something, and then you roll the other one to figure out what your ones column is. So that's why there's two different D10. If you don't have two different ones, it is totally fine to just roll this one twice without the zeros on it. Just like determine which one is which before you roll it. So it's like, all right, I'm gonna roll this first. This is gonna be my 10, and you roll it and you get an 8. So it's like, okay, this is 80 something, and then you roll your second one and you figure out it's 83. However that works, just you can use both if you have both, and if you don't, that's fine. And then lastly, the D12, typically used for like a particularly large weapon or again, some spells. But like I'm saying, those are only very specific examples. So you're not going to use all of them in one character throughout the game. So just figure out which ones you're going to use the most. All right, last thing for this video, I cannot talk about dice for Dungeons & Dragons without talking about disadvantage and advantage. This is a way that you roll dice with more luck or less luck with the way that statistics work in your favor or against you. There are some rules in D&D that tell you when to roll with advantage or disadvantage, and so I'm going to explain that really quick so that your DM, when they call that out, you know exactly what they're talking about. This entirely has to do with like the luck of the circumstances, or if it is more likely for you to succeed or fail at a particular attack or skill check that you're trying to make. So with that, advantage is rolling 2 d20 instead of 1 for that particular attack. We'll use an attack for an example. And then just taking the higher number. You don't add them together, you just use the higher number. And so with that, you are more likely to have a higher number if you get to roll twice and pick the higher number out of that. You get a little bit of a buff to your chances of succeeding. And so if your DM says, all right, great, you get to make that attack with advantage, grab 2 of these, give them both a roll, take your higher one, and then add the numbers you need to for that attack. An example of where that might come up is, let's say you and your party are all fighting a creature, and one of your other party members runs over, shoves it, and it falls over to the ground. And now it's on its back, looking up at you as you walk forward with your sword, and you go to slash it down on the ground. That whole situation becomes a lot easier for you to hit it with your sword when it's on its back, prone on the ground, than if it were standing up, using its arms, using its weapons to block, deflect, and all of that. It is less mobile. It is less prepared. It is not in some type of defensive stance. And so with that, easier opportunity for you to hit it. That would be an opportunity to roll with advantage. Gives you a better chance to hit. Then there's the opposite side of that too. There is rolling with disadvantage. The example I will use for this is, let's say, very common starting place. Your first session that you're stepping into, you start in a tavern and you're meeting your new friends and you're all sitting around the table talking about your plans on whatever this journey is going to hold. And your character likes a little bit of drink. And so throughout this whole conversation, they drink, they have 6, 7 ales. And with that, you want your character to get drunk at the beginning of the day before you all head out. With that, being drunk would likely cause you to have to roll some skills or attacks with disadvantage if your character were so affected by the alcohol that they were drinking. And so with that, disadvantage just kind of represents that, hey, for the time being, your character is not as skillful as they normally are. And so now, when you make some skill checks, you're going to do it with disadvantage. You can still succeed at them. It's not an automatic failure. You're just less likely to succeed at them. So we're going to skew the numbers a little bit, give it a lower average to just kind of represent that. All right, that's going to be it for this dice video. We've talked about what are they called, what are they used for, which ones do I need, how does this work. We talked about advantage and disadvantage. And so lastly, if you were getting ready to play and you need to know, do I need my own dice or should I get my own? If you want to get your own and you can and you have access to them, great. Go ahead and buy your own set. Typically it's that set of 7. So I would say get that. It's a great starter set just to make sure that you have everything that you need. And with that, you can play. You might not even need to buy them. Most likely, if you have a DM that's been playing for a while or even some other players, they will likely have extras. And so if you do not have access, do not want to, or don't even know if you're going to commit to D&D long term, that it's like, I'd love to try it, don't want to buy my own dice, ask the folks that you're playing with if anyone has any extras. I'm sure that somebody will. And also there is a digital option. You could very easily go to a search engine and find tabletop RPG dice, find some computer version of randomized numbers, dice that actually roll on the screen, things like that. All completely viable options. Just ask your DM what they prefer or if they have any extras as well. But with that, you should be good to go on dice. And so stick around. I'm going to do some other videos. I'm going to do one on role playing, maybe one on spell casting, just knowing that that can be really difficult to get into, and some of the other basic rules and stuff like that for D&D. But enjoy. I'm so excited for you to get to try it out. And of course, comment on some topics that you would have some questions about or anything else that's left. I can make some more videos on that too. See you around.